Greetings, fellow alchemists, and welcome to Wordplay Wizardry. Last time, we talked about perspective and tense. Today, I want to continue the planning process and go over end goals, more specifically, word count. Projects in literature are usually classified by length. Previously, we'd be talking about page count. However, given the variable size of digital books, depending on the size of the reader, it's far easier to determine overall length by using word count. This is also used by editors, publishers, and contests for submissions, and is a good indicator for readers about the time commitment ahead of them. So what are the classifications? We have flash fiction, short story, novelette, novella, and novel. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that these classifications only apply to fiction. Nonfiction really only begins at the novel length and has different classifications. You are unlikely to find a flash fiction length nonfiction book. I know we haven't defined that length yet, but when we do, you'll understand. And poetry has its own system, because some poems can be under 50 words, such as a haiku, and some can be told in epic format. Oh, and one last thing to mention. These classification and count numbers are only for today's standards, because some classics don't fall into their assigned category. But by writing to these numbers, you're not exactly not writing to market, which is something we will discuss. Instead, you're writing to a standard. Much like the socially agreed upon elements for genres, project length standards work much the same way. In order to better understand and classify new books, the system exists. Back to those length numbers. They are, for flash fiction, they'll usually fall between 300 and 1,500 words. A short story will fall between 1,500 and 7,500 words. A novelette will fall between 7,500 and 15,000. A novella will often fall between 15,000 and 40,000 words. And a novel will be 50,000 or more words. As you can see, there's a reason why nonfiction works all hit the novel length category. Now, you may notice a slight gap between the last two groups. And that's because this is a bit of a gray area. Several official sites and awards have different requirements. For example, the Nebula Awards given out to science fiction and fantasy books start the novel classification at 40,000 words and go up from there. For National Novel Writing Month, aka NaNoWriMo, which usually takes place in November, the classification starts at 50,000 words or more. Since the Nebula Awards say 40,000 or more words, it may just be best to keep your novel at 50,000 or more. There's a few other classifications that fall outside the normal range, namely young readers and nonfiction. For the young reader group, the numbers are picture books, which fall between 300 and 1,000 words, early reader books, which are those intended for primary school / elementary school / grade school readers, and that range is between 300 and 3,500 words. Chapter books, which are intended for intermediate readers, and that range is between 4,000 and 10,000 words. Middle grade readers, which is intended for junior high or middle school ages, and that range is between 15,000 and 30,000 words. And finally, young adult or YA, which is geared towards middle school and high school / secondary school ages. And those numbers are between 35,000 and 50,000 words. The idea behind some of these classifications is that as young readers get older, their reading ability advances. They can understand more and handle longer books. For nonfiction, the lengths are how-to or self-help, depending on the topic, and its range is between 45 and 60,000 words. General nonfiction is 70,000 to 80,000 words. Memoirs will usually be between 80,000 and 100,000 words. A biography or autobiography will usually fall between 80,000 and 200,000 words. Let's jump back to fiction. If you intend to write something shorter, say flash fiction or a short story, then those numbers are all you need to know. Anything shorter than a novel, and it uses the general guideline numbers as opposed to genre-specific numbers. As I said, the line for a fiction novel typically starts at around 50,000 words. However, for a lot of genres, they go past that number, well past, in fact. Usually there's a range, and it covers most of what's on the market for that particular genre. Though it should be said that those specific numbers are market averages. Some genres require longer in order to accommodate the subject matter, such as with fantasy and science fiction. And that's often due to simply the amount of world building required. Now, the genre-specific numbers are general fiction, which will include things like action-adventure, comedy, drama, and that range is between 50,000 and 90,000 words. With fantasy, 70,000 is the absolute low end here. Typically, the range is between 90,000 and 150,000. For historical, the range is 70,000 words to 100,000 words, often erring on the higher side. For horror, the range is 60,000 to 90,000 words. For mystery, it's 60,000 to 85,000. For paranormal, it's 75,000 to 90,000. Now, one genre that I didn't talk about in the genre episode was romance. Romance is where you get all the dramatic love stories, but also includes erotica. And some books can get downright steamy. This is where all of your serious adult books will usually fall. And the range for romance is 70,000 to 90,000 on average. For science fiction, the range goes from 75,000 to 150,000. Before moving on, I do want to mention something. With fantasy and sci-fi, specifically science fiction, if you're planning to do a series, each novel can be on the lower end of the scale. And the reason for that is that the world building that would normally take up a lot of space can happen over multiple books. Moving on to thriller and suspense, that range is 70,000 to 90,000. A good guideline to keep in mind is that debut novels should keep close to the industry average, though close being a relative term, as they can be plus or minus 10,000 words and still be fine. Once you establish yourself and have a few titles under your belt, you can start toying with the length range, meaning going higher or lower. So long as you don't dip too low or go to the extreme other end and have a 300,000 word comedy, you should be fine. You may have noticed there's a few genres where the industry average is quite high. Historical, fantasy, and science fiction all are on the upper end of the scale. With these, readers are much more comfortable passing the industry average of other genres. The Game of Thrones series, for instance, averages 350,000 words, with a couple of books even hitting the 400,000 range. Though I would not recommend that for a debut novel. Stick with the guidelines, and you should be fine. So, why does any of this matter? A few reasons. First and foremost, to give yourself a goal. Every race has a finish line, and your book needs one as well. You know where it starts, and with a word count standard, you know where you want to reach an end. Then, all you have to do is fill in that very large gap. You also want something that is accessible by the audience. Readers have expectations when they see words like novel and novella, but they also have expectations when they reach for a particular genre. Too short, and they're disappointed. Too long, and they'll lose interest. Sure, the primary goal is to tell your story, but you also want readers to enjoy the telling. We accept books like Game of Thrones being so long simply because of how layered they are. The other reason to have a word count standard is market acceptance. It's always good to stand out, but in terms of length, fitting in is also good. It's preferred, in fact. Let me give you an example, an extreme. You have a 500,000 word mystery novel. The industry average is 85,000 words. Yes, you stand out. But is that a good thing? Readers will likely turn away simply because of how long they have to wait to find out who done it. Editors will more than likely cringe at that length as well. Any willing to read such an epic will probably start asking if you can turn it into a series, because 500,000 words is enough for a 5-book mystery. The best way to stand out is superior writing. That and just the biggest marketing budget ever. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the work itself. Working with a length goal also helps you, the writer. It means that you have to narrow your focus a bit. Cut out anything that doesn't need to be there. Which leads to why it's the most important point to remember. Now, if you're planning a series, you can include things that don't necessarily pay off in just a single novel. But at the same time, they also need that payoff. If it's going to take too long to reach it, consider cutting, especially if it's not a plot point. Now, once you've established an end goal, there's another helpful bonus. You can break up the work into writing goals. This means weekly or daily word count totals. So let's say you're shooting for 70,000 words. That's a good average number for the vast majority of genres. Odds are you'll be a part-time writer. In this case, part-time writer is usually someone with a day job. All this really means is you have a little less time to write, which is fine, totally acceptable. There's a lot of part-time writers who are very successful on the market. In this scenario, day job and other obligations only allow you enough time to write between 400 and 700 words a day. That's a weekly total of between 3,000 and 5,000 words. Knowing that and your end goal number, you're looking at between 23 and 14 weeks to complete your draft. But remember, that's just pure writing time. That doesn't take into account any of the necessary planning time. And for a 70,000 word novel, you're probably looking at a couple of weeks for that. What that math does do is give you an approximate schedule. And 4 to 6 months for a complete novel is not a bad time frame. The good news is this process is starting to pick up speed. Following the steps so far, you've got a basic story idea, a small blurb to give it shape, a genre, and an approximate length. All you're missing is a few key elements, and you've got everything necessary for a novel. And on that note, we'll wrap up this video. As always, if you want to hear more about any of these topics, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment if you're enjoying. Until next time, fellow alchemists, take care.